Okay, welcome to another episode of Level 1 Restoration Behind the Scenes. What we have here today is a car we bought for a customer. Actually, one of my guys found this car and told a customer about it. It was local here to us in Colorado. And it had been for sale, you know, a time or two throughout its past. I think it even made an appearance on Bring a Trailer one time. And it's just a wonderful car. So it's a 1974 Trans Am 455 Super Duty. So I really love these cars. I think they represent one of the best values in the collector car whole market today. They are overshadowed a little bit by 73s. The 73s are really expensive. There's been, you know, 73 Super Duty Trans Ams up in the $300,000+ range and even beyond. So those are really expensive and unobtainable for most people. Now the 74s, the styling changed just a little bit. And to me, I still love a 74. And basically they had the same exact engine as a 73. They didn't change anything about the performance or the horsepower on a 74 versus a 73 Super Duty Trans Am. So a quick look at 74 Trans Ams. They made roughly 10,000 74 Trans Ams. 900, and I believe it's 34 of these had a Super Duty engine. And it's basically 700, and I think it's 31 of those cars, somewhere in the neighborhood of that anyway, don't quote me. And 731 of those had an automatic. 212 of those cars had a manual transmission, which would be a 4-speed only. And so when it came to automatic versus manual transmission, you could not get air conditioning on a manual transmission car, which I think is pretty cool. But if you lived in a hot climate or you did plan on driving this thing all year round, you probably would want air conditioning. And so quite a lot of the automatics have air conditioning. This is one of them. And just a little bit of Trans Am history. So in 69, everyone knows for the most part that 69 Trans Ams were all white with blue stripes. In 1970, they made 697 of those cars. In 70, they made 3,000 in some of those cars. They were either white or blue. And then in 71 and 2, that was the same story. It was either white or blue. That was the only option you had. So in 73, they started changing things up a little bit. You could get Brewster green, Buccaneer red, or Cameo white, like this car is. Then in 74, they retained the white, but you could get Admiralty blue or Buccaneer red. So they carried over two colors, but they exchanged the green for the blue. And all of them are great colors, I believe. And so that's basically how that went. So as time went on, there was a strike, and the 72 was a pretty low production year for Trans Am. And then in 73, it started climbing back up. 74, you're at 10,000, and it just steadily increased until the late 70s when they were making upwards of 100,000 and above. Second generation Trans Ams in 78, 79, really big production years. And those cars are wildly popular, and their value is gaining all the time. So a 74 to me represents the last of an era performance-wise, but still then a look to the future. They started getting more aerodynamic with the grille and the lower valance. They retained this roof like the early 70 to 73 Trans Ams up to 74 had this roof, and then we'll go around and take a look at the taillights. The taillights are like a 78. So 74 to 78 had basically the same look in the rear. You know, so they're all great looking cars. I mean, if you like these cars, 74 kind of gives you a little bit of old with a little bit of new. You know, plus if you're doing a Super Duty, the extreme rarity and a lot of performance. So on the performance side, we'll talk about that for a second. One of the first road tests that was ever done with the Super Duty 74 Trans Am, they didn't think they were going to be able to get a Trans Am from Pontiac, a Super Duty, to test, and this particular magazine. So they knew someone who had received one, and it happened to be an air-conditioned automatic, just like this car, and it was in Detroit, and it was a 30-something degree day. Maybe some people watching this video will be able to put in the comments the exact Road and Track or Motor Trend or whoever it was that tested it. The thing ran low 14s at around 100 miles an hour, and the thing that they talked about a lot was that there was no traction whatsoever. I mean, it was just spinning, and there was hardly anything they could do to prevent it. So obviously a solid 13-second car under good conditions, and that was good by 1970 standards, let alone 1974. So this was after the first gas crunch, and it was over for almost everybody, but Pontiac held in there with one of the top performing muscle cars of the whole entire muscle car era. So here's a great example of that. We're going to talk a little bit more about this car in particular. Okay, let's have a look under the hood of this car here. So this car is a 29,000 mile car. So every piece of this car is original drivetrain. So engine, we're talking alternator, exhaust manifolds, all of this AC component, radiator, all of this stuff, radiator hoses, really remarkable condition this car is in. The engine on these Super Duties, especially when they have air conditioning, that's not much to look at, but it, you know, it packs a big punch. And when we've restored these cars in the past, we get around 400 horsepower out of these with the factory cam through exhaust manifolds on an engine dyno. So that's pretty impressive. And of course, 500 plus foot-pounds of torque. So really we haven't done an extensive detail under the hood yet, but it's still, I mean, it looks pretty good. It doesn't need much. It looks like we might address the booster and the master cylinder's appearance, perhaps. It still has the Super Duty valve cover information that was like the oil change information and stuff. And that paint, that's all original once again. So really good original car. And so really that's, you know, that's great stuff. 29,000 mile car there. Okay, one more cool piece of information, and then we'll talk about this particular car and the guy that bought it and a little bit of the backstory. But I think it's interesting to know, the diehard Pontiac guys would know this, but starting in '72, GM started doing what Ford and Mopar had been doing all along the muscle car era. They included a letter in the VIN number that designated what engine the car had. So probably the most famous use of that would be an R code Ford. Everyone talks about an R code. Well, what it means is it's in the VIN number, and that represents the engine. So Pontiac and Chevy and all of GM started doing this. If they had a top performance engine, or really anything, they would indicate it by a letter in the VIN number. So this, on these Super Duty Trans Ams, that designation is X. So if you found just a shell of a second generation Trans Am sitting in someone's garage or whatever, and you looked at the VIN number and it had an X in the VIN number, you would know automatically that this is a real Super Duty Trans Am. So this particular car we got recently, and we purchased it for a guy named Harry Snow. Harry has all kinds of cool cars. He's out in New England, and the car came from here, so it's a logical thing to have him brought into our shop. And we put reproduction original tires on this car. I mentioned the Gardner exhaust. We did that. And if it needed tuned or if it needed anything, this one's running really good right now. We would just take care of all that stuff and really just solidify his investment that he made in this car and send it to him turnkey, ready to go. So we love doing this for people and customers in general, and we do quite a bit of it because, as you can imagine, in a busy restoration shop, we have a lot of contacts, and people call us on cars and stuff like that all the time. So Ray made the call to Harry, and he said, Harry, I know this guy here in Colorado with this really good Super Duty Trans Am. We went through all the particulars, and he liked it and he bought it. And I think it was a great buy, and I highly recommend these cars. I think they're going to hold their value really well. And so a couple of things about this car in particular. It came out of the Chicago area. That makes sense that it was undercoated at one time. A lot of people back in the Midwest, if you live there, your car will rust out if you drive it at all in the wintertime. So they protected it with undercoating. This particular car, the second owner of this car got it, and it had 24,000 miles on it in 1979. And so now it has just 29,000 miles on it. And it has a nice board, which will show you, like the show car board for this car, that list out all of the things about the car and how they're all original to this car. So I don't know if I think this is probably at least a fairly long-term car for Harry. I would think so. He's going to love driving this car when it warms up over there in New England, I'm sure, this year. So anyway, that's a little bit about this car. 100% original sheet metal everywhere. The drivetrain, it is a one repaint. Quite a lot of options actually on this particular car. It has, as you can see, the honeycomb wheels here, the air conditioning we've talked about. It has a tilt wheel. It has an 8-track player. It has power windows. It's got quite a lot of options for one of these. Now, Trans Ams, you see a lot of Trans Ams with very few options, and the reason is every Trans Am had a Positraction rear end. They had either a 4-speed or a Turbo 400 in this era. You couldn't get, only in '69 could you have gotten a 3-speed manual transmission, and that was very few of those cars received that. So you automatically had rally gauges, you had the Trans Am specific steering wheel, all the Trans Am specific suspension, so tack and gauges, all that stuff was standard on a Trans Am. So, and unless you wanted air conditioning or I guess even a center console was actually an option, but bucket seats were standard. So Trans Ams by nature is an option that included quite a few really cool high performance orientated options. So a little bit of history on 74 Trans Ams, and this is a really great example right here. We're going to take a look at the upholstery of this and talk a little bit about some of the upholstery color options, which started to get pretty interesting starting in 1974. Let's take a look. All right, taking a look at the inside of this car here. This car has cloth saddle interior. So it's a combination of vinyl and cloth, but it has this saddle colored cloth interior, which, by the way, we have exhausted our search. We can't find any of this cloth material here. So if you or someone you know has any amount of this original material, we need to make a repair to each small seat. It's such a thin material that over time it just started to let go. So we're being really careful with it now, but we'll eventually get that addressed even if we don't get it done here. But these cars had a lot of things in 74 started getting a little different. One thing that's unique to 74s is the radial tuned suspension. These cars started coming with radial tires exclusively in 74. You could option it prior, but it became standard. This little emblem was mounted on the glove compartment, which was a one-year only thing. After that, it moved over to the dash. But as far as the upholstery on these cars go, we mentioned the saddle. You could have a black interior, naturally, cloth or vinyl. You could have a blue interior. that would be vinyl, I think, only. You could have red or green interior, but here's where it gets interesting. You could have a white interior with black appointments. And that's kind of normal on an older car with a white interior. That, you know, the dash is not white on a white interior car, and of course the carpet is not white. So a lot, and the console, of course, would be black as well. So this, you know, forward stuff in the carpet would be black. But what's really interesting is you could get this car with a white interior with blue appointments. So the console and the dash and all these little accessory things could be blue. And then you could also have that with red and even green. So you can really get some interesting color combinations going with the interior. Clearly that's kind of a move. You know, we're mid-70s here. This is definitely a sign of things to come. The auto manufacturers had to really get creative with decals and stripes and interior options and things like that, because performance was about to be dead, although Pontiac would never let it quite die. They stayed strong all the way through this era of car anyway. But so anyway, yeah, very interesting what you could do with some of the colors on these cars. And in this case, the seat belts were black. And but anyway, very nice interior. The beautiful dash and steering wheel and everything is just wonderful on this car. And we've mentioned this before in other videos, but this car has the ratcheting shifter. If you hold it over to the right, as hard as you want to push it, it's not going to go past second gear. And then you kind of let up and move it over again for past third gear or drive. And so that's pretty cool. That's a really neat option. You can see the AM/FM radio, the rear window, electric rear window defroster, so it has the heating lines in the glass. And then of course the voltmeter, the fuel gauge, oil pressure, water temperature, and then TAC, the RPM, and then the speedometer there. And so, yeah, really neat, solid old car. So we're really happy to be able to bring this car to you and show you this wonderful 74 Trans Am Super Duty. Hey, thanks for watching, and we really love it when you comment, and please like and subscribe and all that good stuff. And we'll see you next time.